Good afternoon. I can see some people still joining, so we'll just give it a minute or two before we get started. Okay, well, it's just after 2, so I think we'll get started. A very warm welcome to this Civic University Network webinar, where we will hear 2 case studies of transformational arts and culture and education sector partnerships. My name is Debbie Squire. I'm the Head of Place and Civic Engagement at Sheffield Hallam University, which is the home of the Civic University Network. Before we begin, we have some webinar housekeeping. The session will be recorded and will be made available through our website after the event. Your cameras and microphones will remain switched off during the session. And if you wish to ask a question to one of our speakers, please post in the Q&A function rather than the chat. That helps with us being able to pick them out, and we'll answer as many questions as we can. For general chat or session commentary, please use the chat function. And if you're on Twitter, you can engage with us at Civic University. The team here will be dropping some links into the chat as we go. At Sheffield Hallam University, we are proud of our civic impact in our place and proud to run the Civic University Network, which aims to spread good civic practice and in particular to support other universities to maximise their civic impact in their place. Our place is South Yorkshire, so I'm particularly delighted that our case studies today come from within our region. Today's session is the first in a series of webinars of case studies which were featured in the Cultural Partnerships Transforming Lives in-person event, which was held in December last year. And these case studies will highlight the different roles universities can play in transformative cultural partnerships, and in some cases will be the start of exploring how universities can do more to amplify the impactful work underway across the wider education sector. Today's case studies are focused on impact in schools, and the organisations sharing their stories with us today are the Doncaster Cultural Education Partnership. We'll hear from Stevie Cairns, who's the Cultural Education Manager, and Grimm & Co, a children's literacy charity based in Rotherham. We'll hear from Gemma Thornton, the Creative Learning Manager for schools. So we will have time for some questions at the end of the presentations. So now I'll hand over to Stevie to give us an overview of the Doncaster Cultural Education Partnership. Thanks, Stevie.
Good afternoon, everybody. I do hope you enjoy my presentation. You will notice that I am not a fan of PowerPoints, so apologies. It's not very fancy, and I tend not to read off them. But we'll see how we go. Yeah, I'm Stevie Cairns. I'm the Cultural Education Manager for the DSEP, the Doncaster Cultural Education Partnership, which is the local cultural education partnership for Doncaster. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So what is the DSEP? So quite simply, the DSEP is a cohort of arts organisations and partners, they're local, regional and national, that engage together to steer the arts and cultural opportunity for children and young people of Doncaster. And as I go through the presentation, you'll notice there's lots of different strands to that, of how we're trying to really make a difference and build our network and our presence within this now city of Doncaster. We'll go to the next slide. Thank you. So these are, we've got a multitude of members and different partners, but these are the partners that sit on our steering group. The steering group is our strategic meeting place where we really sort of set the agenda and drive what we believe needs to happen within Doncaster. So we've got Doncaster Stories, they're the National Literacy Trust's hub based in Doncaster. We've got CAST, our theatre venue, the Royal Opera House. So the Royal Opera House have been doing work for about 3 years within Doncaster. They are coming, unfortunately, to an end at the summer, but wonderfully are moving on to Rotherham to start some projects in Rotherham. So we're very glad we're handing the baton over. We've got Darts, which is based at the Point Gallery. We've got Dagenham Galleries Library and Museum, affectionately known as DGLAM. We've also got, apologies, we've also got the Doncaster Music Education Hub, along with representation from primary and secondary schools. There's Hall Cross Academy, which is now part of the Exceed Learning Trust, as well as the Rose Learning Trust, and we use those particular partners to really inform us as much as possible about primary and secondary, particularly the sort of needs and wants of young people and teachers, and how we can facilitate in schools and how we can really make a difference. Next slide, please. So our vision is quite straightforward and simple. We want to connect, we want to engage, we want to increase opportunity. Most importantly, I think at the minute, we want to re-instill pride in Doncaster and contribute to the South Yorkshire region and Yorkshire. Personally, I find it really exciting how much is going on in the county and particularly in South Yorkshire, and we really need to embrace our young people with those opportunities and show the significance of what's happening around us. So next slide, please. Right, before we play the video, is it too late to go back? I'm so sorry, Nick. Are we good? Are we good to pause? I'll take that as a yes. Thank you. So the project that I want to talk about today was last May, so quite some time ago, but it was really a standout piece of work that we did that's really set a bar and a model for how we want to progress. So it was the Queen's Platinum Jubilee in June, and in May we held a celebration day that involved 150 young people coming to the city centre, that their schools had not had a major opportunity or options for engaging in arts and culture. The partnership did quite a large piece of research that looked at every school in the borough, so about 140 primary, secondary and SEN schools, and their engagement with local arts organisations. Now, we had to take a bit of a pinch of salt with this research because obviously data is only as current as from the time it's gathered, and we take in respect that we didn't take account for any activities that were actually held in school. This was engagement with places like CAST and Doncaster Stories. Had they had practitioners from those organisations within the school? Had they come out and engaged with the school and with those organisations? And from that we had some lots of detail about which were our lower engaged schools, or potentially our lowest engaged schools within the borough. We then approached the bottom, I say bottom four with apprehension. This is not sort of a negative on schools, but the schools that showed least opportunity of engagement. And I approached them last May and said, we've got some funding, would you like to participate? And we got an amazing response, mainly I believe because it was free. Funding, particularly now even a year on, is a major barrier. I probably don't need to tell anybody this, and particularly things like transport. The cost of transport of getting schools to places is increased substantially. So we provided coaches and provided 5 workshops. So there was a visual arts workshop, a drama workshop, a poetry and illustration workshop, a dance workshop and a heritage workshop between 3 of our organisations. So we're quite lucky within Doncaster. The Point, D-Glam and Cast are all within walking distance. So these young people came and throughout the day had a carousel, almost like a round robin of events where they were escorted. The teachers were able to participate as well. So it was a wonderful opportunity for CPD. And they, throughout the day, went from session to session, had some amazing feedback from the young people. One that sticks in my mind said it was the best day they'd ever had at school. The teachers said they felt so motivated and so re-engaged, and the fact that they were out of the classroom, that they were working with professional practitioners and facilitators and you know, sort of big national and local organisations, and being in places like galleries and theatre spaces was, you know, quite humbling for them, but also I think sometimes I come from a teaching background, and I think sometimes just having a little bit of a change of scenery can help sort of re-inspire. And then at the end of the day, the Royal Opera House led all of these young people in a combined group dance. And there is a video, I'm talking about it, and there is a video, a short video where I talk about it some more. So if we could play the video, that sort of gives loads more detail and pictures say it all.
I'm Stevie Cairns and I am the Cultural Education Manager for the DSEP. The DSEP is the Doncaster Cultural Education Partnership and is a cohort of arts and cultural organisations based here in Doncaster as well as nationally. The DSEP are committed to inspiring, empowering and celebrating the creativity of our children and young people here in Doncaster. Our partnership includes CAST, DARTS, Doncaster Gallery, Library and Museum, Doncaster Music Service, Doncaster Stories, the National Literacy Trust Hub, Expect Youth, IVE and Royal Opera House. In May 2022, the partnership worked together to stage an event to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. 4 local primary schools visited our partners' venues to participate in a carousel of arts and cultural workshops. Journalism at Doncaster Library. Visual arts at CAST. Drama at Darts. Poetry and illustration with Doncaster Stories. And dance with Royal Opera House. The day closed with an ensemble performance involving all the young people in Sir Nigel Gresley Square. The children and young people who attended, along with their teachers, were enthusiastic, engaged, and so energetic throughout the day. It was truly a wonderful experience. DSEP are planning future events for schools and young people. The Queen's Platinum Jubilee event has showcased the strength of our partnership and the presence of arts and culture here in Doncaster.
Thank you. So it's made a real big impact, and I'm going to talk a little bit later about that impact and how we're following on. But what I did want to sort of talk about a little bit was the DSEP strategic initiatives, just to paint a much bigger picture of where our work is now beginning to focus on. So you might have noticed that there was a mention of IVE in there. So some of you may know that IVE was the Arts Council's bridging organisation for Yorkshire and Humberside, which is where we gained our partnership investment funding from. They actually ceased to be that bridging organisation at the end of March, unfortunately. So they were a partner that used to sit on our steering group and advise and contribute, but unfortunately our partnership investment funding ends at the end of the year. So again, I'll talk a little bit more in detail about what we're hoping to do. So our strategic initiatives for this partnership investment, and sort of generally that tie into this focus of engaging with children and young people, as you can see on the slide there. So initially primarily we want to begin to elevate youth voice and youth-led activities. So not just assuming what young people want, but then those really voicing what they want and what they feel they need. We've just had a 10-year plan launch for children and young people document. I will send the link out. Apologies, I probably misnamed it, but that was really driven by our youth service and our youth council, who were starting to build up a real big strong connection and as part of our network. So hopefully in the coming months I'll be visiting the youth council. We've recently just had some training from the youth service to gain our child-friendly quality mark, which is something that's being rolled out in Doncaster, where organisations are showing an interest in how in their youth voice and participation, and how we can set targets and benchmarks for where we would like to be. And I'm really excited that the partners are getting involved as well. So hopefully by the end of this year, all our partners, as well as the DSET, will have the child quality mark and be able to sort of signify our focus within youth voice. Second thing, and this is quite a big one as well, they're all quite big, is creative careers. So Doncaster has a creative careers website. So we have just, and I think it's gone live today, relaunched our DSET website. We wanted to sort of make this a platform that was accessible for teachers and young people and other arts organisations, where it was a hub of information, links to all our partners, links to the work and the arts and cultural work that's happening in Doncaster. So we had a little bit, technical term that I'm using is a zhuzh of the website. So we're hoping to keep it a lot more up to date, a lot more current, with new stories and sharing of information. And the other thing that website is going to do is going to link to two other websites, one for Doncaster Creative Network, which I will talk about in a little while, and the other one is our Creative Careers website. So we're updating content over the next couple of months, and this is going to be a resource that we are wanting to roll out to primary and secondary schools and SEN schools and colleges HE, of the variety of jobs and roles within the arts organisation. I know when I was at school and said I wanted to go into the arts and do drama, I mean, I did a dance degree and made my mum cry when I told her. There's such a lack of understanding of the vastness of creative industries and the different roles, and you know, there's still a need for people such as accountants, and it's not just, I always say it's not just jazz hands and glitter. So we really want to invest some time into that, and we're working with some local artists to source other emerging and established artists within the local area to create some videos, almost like some TikTok videos that young people can engage with, to sort of find out how people got in the industry, how do they work. It's not your typical 9 to 5, a lot of the jobs within the industry. And from that, we'll be able to connect with the Doncaster Creative Network, and they will be able to use this Creative Careers website as a marketing platform to be able to share the work they're doing, and hopefully increase the amount of work they're doing as schools will be accessing this. So one of the big ones, income generation and governance. Always a contentious issue. Like I said, we are funding for my role ends at the end of December. So we're currently looking for some more income as ever, some more funding. We were really lucky to gain a big pot of money from Doncaster Council, who runs DGLAM actually, and they are a massive supporter of the partnership and really engaged. And we're very lucky to have Nick Stopford, the head of culture, and his team on board. And they've just given us 17,000 towards our extended project from last year to run this year. But we are forever looking for funding and looking for governance as well. Now Ivy aren't here, we want to look at how we can work best as a partnership. So I'm currently doing a little bit of research of how we can manage that, and how not to affect the partners' funding that they need and impact on their agenda, but how we can make it, how we can continue to strengthen the partnership and the collaboration. The next point, participation of low engagement schools. So that's very much related to the Queen's Platinum and Jubilee project and that work we do. And we're continually looking for how we can connect with schools and increase those opportunities, particularly how we can help them overcome the barriers to participation. And what we're finding in Doncaster is there's so much. I mean, I'm from Doncaster, never worked in Doncaster until last February when I got this role, and I was quite ashamed of myself of how little I actually knew about the art scene and what was on offer. We should be so proud in Doncaster and South Yorkshire, and there's such a lack of awareness of what's actually happening and what's on our doorstep. So we're trying to increase that awareness. And linked with the next point, CPD, is we're offering every teacher opportunities to take part in CPD, whether that is training and workshops delivered by our partners. Darts and the music service are particularly fantastic in offering all different types of training and teach CPD, but also we're trying to facilitate our own. So February, we offered a funding workshop for teachers and also creatives, trying to give them the tools and the know-how of how to seek funding to increase the amount of activity. And that was run by Lisa Jaggett, who is the font of all knowledge with regards to funding. And we're actually running another one this week as well, specifically for teachers, of how to create almost a funding toolkit and where to go for that funding. Because sometimes, you know, as you all will know, it's few and far between. There's a quick turnaround, be able to, you know, put project delivery into practice. So we're looking at branching out on that as well. Building and maintaining relationships. I find that I talk a lot for a living, so I'm constantly trying to network and build those relationships and find out who knows what, and it's really about connection, and events like today and the Civic University Network is so important, because I think as the bridging organisations for Arts Council have come to an end, we really need to look at regionally of how we can support each other and share resources and share good practice. So constantly looking at to make connections. And lastly, Arts Award and Arts Mark. Some of you may be familiar with this. So Arts Award is a recognised qualification that there's 5 different stages, right from primary up until the equivalent of A level, and it's also with UCAS points that can be delivered in schools that really celebrate the arts that's already embedded into the curriculum. An Arts Mark is a very similar to the child friendly mark, is a I don't want to say quality mark, I get told off when I say quality mark. It's a sign that a school is taking the arts and cultural offer very seriously, and there's different levels, and it's all about progressing, about again sharing good practice with other schools. And we've got about nearly 30 schools in the borough with ArtsMark, which is really good going. The schools do have to pay to register, and it's a lot of work. So the schools that do take part in that really deserve some credit for that, because it's a massive commitment, but also so worthwhile. So I will stop talking for a little bit, and just to get a better picture of Arts Award and ArtsMark, how it works in schools. We've got a video that was made last year from Townfields Primary School, one of our primary schools within the city centre. They have I think it's 27 different languages spoken in that school, and just how they've used arts and culture to really embrace the curriculum, and how we've had the impact of that, of how it's improved attendance and attainment. So I will let the video talk because it does a lot better job than me. Working.
Hello, I'm Helena Honeybone, and it's a privilege to be the head teacher at Townfield Primary School. We are a school that's really proud of our diverse cultural population, and it's lovely to be able to share with you some of our journey through Artsmark and beyond. So our journey through Artsmark has really been supported by strong relationships with our community and a range of arts and cultural organisations, including Doncaster Music Hub, DART, CAST, The Point, the Jazz Association and Doncaster Stories. And I think actually we're really lucky to have such strength in Doncaster in terms of arts-based partners who are incredibly supportive of schools and the work that we do.
So my name's Ian Medwell and I'm the music lead at Townfield Primary School, and it's a privilege to be able to talk to everybody about how we use music and the arts to support our children across all areas of the curriculum. Completing the Artsmark over that 2-year period, it really made us reflect on our journey so far. We always felt like art was and the arts were really strong within our school, but it really helped us to refine and sort of consider our next steps.
Hello, I'm Sarah Fletcher, one of the senior leaders here at Townfield Primary. We really believe here at Townfield that the arts are incredibly important in enriching the lives of both our children, our parents, and our families. First-hand experiences are incredibly important to us within the arts. We really seek out these for our children. So access to pop-up theatres, for example, to CAST, Doncaster Music Hub ensembles, local artists and illustrators, performers from secondary schools, even big bands as part of the Doncaster Youth Jazz Association Exchange. These really enable our children to experience the awe and wonder that music and the wider arts has to offer.
I think one of the other real positives for us of the Artsmark process was that opportunity really to collaborate with our professional partners and strengthen those roles and relationships even further.
Our dance curriculum in school has also strengthened. We've been really fortunate to link in with the opportunities afforded to us through the Royal Opera House and the Royal Ballet.
So my name is Juliet and I really like dancing, and we also do lessons, ballet lessons with Royal Ballet.
We're really proud of our school choir, led by our own school staff. We ensure that it's open to every child who wants to sing. They've had multiple opportunities to perform in front of wider audiences, so whether that be lunch times in school or within our community, so local care homes, for example, and then collaborating with other choirs through larger events such as Sing Out and working with Opera North. So I'd just like to say thank you to our fantastic staff team at Townfield, to our governors, to our partners within the arts in Doncaster, and to the support that we received through Artsmark. Together,
we've made a positive difference to hundreds of children and families.
Apologies there. I think both videos have got the music's not there, so I will share those videos if anybody does want to sort of refer back. And that's the sort of ethos that we're trying to support across Doncaster in our schools, of really embracing the arts and culture within the education, within the curriculum, and really make a difference. So it's not just about the children and young people being able to have the opportunity, but the impact it makes on mental health and well-being, bringing families and communities together, the support of emerging artists and creatives within the city to be able to support local economy and allow freelancers to establish a career and a living. All of these things are entwined in the work that we do. And the word that we always come back to is legacy. We are wanting to create and establish a legacy for Doncaster, reinstill pride and have a longevity in everything that we do. So to move on, just quickly to tell you what's coming next, along with all the work with regards to the strategic initiatives, like I said, Doncaster Council very graciously gave us 17,000 to do a number of projects, and the two significant elements of that is another carousel day, so another 150 young people from our lowest engaged schools. So the schools that we participated with last year have now become way more engaged. So we've got other schools that have maybe had reduced opportunity that have now fallen below those schools. So I'll be approaching them this week to invite them. Very similar structure. They'll be participating in 5 different workshops and coming together for a celebration at the end of the day, weather permitting, in Nigel Gresley Square again. So it's about just, bringing schools together as well, and teachers from different schools that around Doncaster that may never have met or bumped into each other, and really sharing that love and passion. And then the second thing we are doing is an international photography project. Doncaster has a link with Wilmington in North Carolina, and we were approached some months ago now to participate in a photography project where young people basically take photographs of their local community, and they'll be shared in an exhibition. So the way that Doncaster are going to engage in this is we've got a professional photographer that will go into the schools that we engaged with last year, because we really want to develop our relationships with schools that we've already engaged with. They'll get a piece of kit, so they'll get a digital camera that they'll be able to keep after the project. They'll get 2 workshops delivered by the practitioner with some space in between for some developments. The young people learn how to take photographs with skill and artistically. The teachers will also gain some CPD from there, so hopefully those skills will then transfer throughout the school. The pictures then, each child will be able to exhibit digitally, so we can share with Wilmington and they can share with us, and sort of start a dialogue in that respect. And they will also be exhibited as any other art exhibition would be, to be confirmed where that's going to happen. And that will that will coincide with the Carousel Day. And all these projects are coming under our Incredible Journeys Festival that will run throughout June, as it is 100 years for the Flying Scotsman anniversary this year. And Doncaster Storytelling Festival will run throughout June with different events, cast youth theatre rehearsals, and their timecasters performance will be just slightly after the end of June, at the beginning of July. And all our other partners are doing some amazing events. There's the Sing Out event where we've got 1,000 primary school children that will be performing at the Dome. And I think I've not done the exact numbers, but we're talking well into the thousands of school children and hundreds of teachers that we'll be connecting with. And hopefully, you know, they'll all take something away, whether it's an amazing experience or a little bit of CPD or a little bit of inspiration, a little bit of momentum to carry them on into the next term. And hopefully this will, you know, as I said earlier about legacy, this will continue over the years and decades, etc., funding permitting, and again really sort of put Doncaster on the map, on the cultural map, and be a force to be reckoned with within the UK. And I won't go on anymore.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Stevie. It's a really inspiring work at scale that you've talked to us about there. So one quick question I had before we move on to Grimm and Co. is you've talked about the impact on the schools that were involved in that first cohort around your Jubilee project. How did you kind of monitor that impact? Did you talk to the children, young people themselves? And just be interested to know how you might have gone about following up with them.
Yeah, I did forget to mention that. Apologies, Debbie. I don't know. Can everybody see me? Is my camera on? It won't let me.
No.
My camera won't let me turn on. Oh, apologies. Right. Yeah, so we did some feedback. So we did a group feedback with the teachers that came, and we got some quotations, and that was filtered into a report for IVE. What we've also done is undertaken a similar piece of research with how the schools are engaging with our partners and other organisations. And what's really clear is the significant increase of those schools that participated last year, that they've been able to make some really strong connections with the music service and darts, and they are now participating in bigger events and accessing those opportunities. Again, I think it's down to awareness. We're working with One Trust to see if we can roll out Arts Award on a bigger scale of how to be able to train teachers up in each individual school within an academy trust, and how that will work to be able to then give the school the tools, basically. So we've seen a massive impact in the fact that schools have now found us and we found them. So they are coming to us and having regular conversations of, our school really want to do this, or our young people really want to do this. So it's sort of the way that I see the DSEP is with this sort of spider in the middle of a web. So we need to start officially monitoring this, definitely, but we are gathering data slowly but surely that really shows sort of movement forward.
Okay, that's brilliant, thank you. We're going to talk a little bit briefly after Gemma's presentation about the involvement or potential involvement more so of HE partners. So for now, thank you very much, Stevie. That was brilliant. And I will hand over to Gemma, who's going to talk to us about Grimm and Co. Thanks, Gemma.
Great, thank you, Debbie, and thanks, Stevie. That was class. Okay, thanks everyone. Just so you know, I did time this earlier and it did go to time, but I talked a million miles an hour. So buckle up your seatbelts and sit in, because we're going to go for it. I want to tell you about this project that I'm very, very excited about, and this had many, many partners, one of them being both the University of Sheffield and Sheffield Hallam. So I'm here today to kind of talk to you about those relationships and what that can open up for an arts organisation, but also the learning that can come out of that for your university. So Grimm & Co is a literacy charity. We are based in Rotherham, South Yorkshire, providing free creative writing workshops for children and young people. We champion the writer in every child. We provide a professional output for all children and young people's work, whether that's in a publication that we sell in our shop, or we actually the children wrote a radio play for BBC Radio 4 where over like 8 million people listened in, which was incredible. Lots and lots of ways to celebrate our children's work. We are a child-led organisation and we take fun very, very seriously. Can I get the next slide, please? So I'm here today to talk to you about the Chapter and Verse project. This wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for the funding we received from Paul Hamlin and their Teacher Development Fund. We partnered with an academy trust, Astrea Academy Trust, and over 2 years we worked with 8 schools, 15 teachers and 14 cohorts of Year 4 pupils, totaling 376 children. It's worth saying here as well that we started this in 2020. So, I mean, we don't even need to go into detail about how awful that was because you've all experienced that also. It's worth saying that Astrea Academy Trust used their own, they've bought into a scheme of work called the Literacy Tree, which is a book-based framework. And so it's the idea being is it's the literacy national curriculum and the reading one put together. So we chose The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis and The Iron Man by Ted Hughes from their Year 4 reading list. And then we delivered residencies in school. Just next slide, but it's not really a slide, it's just a little pop-up, thank you. So this brings me to our inquiry question, which we worked with evaluation support provided by Paul Hamlin, but also I worked closely with colleagues at Hallam and the University of Sheffield to generate this inquiry question, which is how does Grimm & Co.'s approach enhance learning through a text-based literacy model and support teacher experimentation and creativity in their practice? And this then was broken down into subcategories, which were as follows. Pedagogy. So the question there was, will introducing teachers to a repertoire of Grimm & Co. approaches increase their risk taking? Then we've got proficiency amongst teacher and artist. How do artists and teachers collaborate most effectively? And it's worth saying here that we adopted a peer mentoring approach here where the teacher and artist both learned from each other, and that was highly successful. And finally, pupil progress. So how can a child-led and arts-based approach improve engagement and progress in literacy in pupils? And it's worth just mentioning here that I'm talking about socio-cultural literacies here, because I mean, let's face it, if a child doesn't believe they can achieve, if they don't believe in their own self-confidence and self-esteem, there's no point even teaching national curriculum objectives. You need to get that foundation in first before you do anything else. Next slide, please. So at the start of the process at our launch event, we introduced teachers to the 2 academics we were working with on the project. So those 2 were Dr. Hugh Escott, who's a senior lecturer at Sheffield Hallam University's English department. He was actually meant to be delivering with me today, but couldn't make it. And Professor Jane Hodson from the University of Sheffield's linguistic department. And teacher buy-in was crucial here, especially as the project began in 2020, when COVID-19 restrictions were obviously in place. There was a lot for our teachers to navigate, and the university supported us with this by explaining the importance of their research, letting teachers understand what they are taking part in from the off, and also how teachers could contribute to this research if they wanted to. So obviously be named as contributors as part of like significant research in education. It was also important that we listened to teachers and heard their concerns. And one example of this is the Wordle that you can see right now is we changed the term CPD, continuous professional development, to teacher learning, because we found that loads of teachers had real anxiety attached to that phrase, that term. Also, when asking teachers how they felt about teacher learning, as you can see there, the answers are very interesting. They're really mixed. And I think that's to do with the fact that this constant barrage of new learning and scrapping what you were meant to be doing and starting something new, and you know, it was important we listened to teachers, and it was important that teachers didn't feel like we were doing this project to them. They were definitely 50% involved in it. Next slide, please. Also, we asked teachers, what barriers do you face preventing you from being creative in the classroom? And we created a wall, and this is only part of the wall. The wall was pretty big. And I like just take a moment to observe some of these, like they are kind of heartbreakingly sad, especially the one on the bottom row there, like lack of value as a professional. This is what our teachers are feeling right now. So it's worth just saying that teachers left that launch day, and the next day their senior leaders came to us, and we presented senior leaders with this wall and said to them, what are you going to do? We want you to create a strategy to support your teachers through this project so that they don't feel like this. And we found that was highly successful. It's also risky. Can you have the next slide, please? Arts-based approaches can be risky. This is what teachers said. They said that children can be a lot more excitable, so they've got to think of more behavior management approaches. Also, what if you focus on the arts and you don't get the national curriculum objectives in? And they were also concerned about the ever-changing landscape of education. But we wanted to provide 6 weeks where teachers can feel they've got some space to explore arts-based approaches, experience enjoyment in the classroom, and share that with their pupils. Next slide, please. So what we did is we created a toolkit. As I said before, the Trust uses the literacy tree framework, and they were not wanting to divert away from that. So we created a Grimm & Co toolkit that ran alongside this literacy tree. And the idea was the toolkit was supposed to establish and introduce new literacies and unthink or reimagine the following statement from Lapp, Moss and Russell that I've put below, which is, although literacy is clearly changing in the world, schools continue to privilege traditional texts, beliefs and forms of reading and writing. And no disrespect to the literacy tree reading list, but the fact that I was doing The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe and The Iron Man shows you that work needs to be done in terms of diversity there. All the activities in the toolkit were either skills focused, so directly linked to the national curriculum objective, or socio-cultural literacy focused, so looking at building confidence and well-being. Next slide, please. So I just want to, in fact, if you could just do it again, I think that's it. Thank you. So I just wanted to show an example because this is one of the activities that the children really loved. So I've just taken this learning objective it was from the Iron Man. It's year 4. So it's to explore the effect of using punctuation and varied sentence lengths and repetition and what effect that has on a text. And we used an extract from the Iron Man and we physicalized punctuation. So the first thing we did is we came up with some actions as a class to represent and symbolize these different pieces of punctuation. Then we walked around the classroom as that piece of punctuation, started adding speech as that punctuation, developed it further. Okay, where would an exclamation mark live and how would that be different to where a comma would live? Next thing we know, we're writing information texts on the habitats of full stops. We then created our own little world of punctuations, and this then culminated in every table in the class being given a punctuation mark and being told that they are ambassadors for that punctuation mark, and they need to write a persuasive writing speech about why their piece of punctuation is the most effective in the extract we gave them. And it was highly successful because children created their own meaning. There was meaning making happening here. They were adding their own meaning to these punctuation rules and they were remembering them. So I've got some notes here and I've gone completely off piste already, so apologies about that. But using the toolkit in this dual purpose way allowed for the development of children, young people, socio-cultural skills, and it also offered insightful moments of revelation when teachers witnessed the impact of this. So by teachers witnessing this and being like, oh my gosh, this works, they were more interested in the process and wanting to buy into the project more. It's worth saying as well that our toolkit remains a live document and teachers are still adding to it all the time. I just wanted to add a quote actually from one of the pupils who was the ambassador for exclamation marks, and she said, look, I'm going to be honest with you, I absolutely love having sprinkles on my ice cream, but if I had sprinkles all the time I just wouldn't like it in as much and it would just start to get a bit boring, and that's why you should only use exclamation marks in certain places. And that was a great example of that child personalizing her learning journey, which is exactly what we were looking for. Next slide, please. And if you press it one more time. Thank you very much. So one of the most significant outcomes from this piece of work has been the time given to teachers to play and experiment. So throughout our teacher and artist reflections, we identified dozens of different examples of teachers demonstrating an invitation to play or expressing how they felt they had been given permission to be creative. And I love that quote there that I've put from Ellsworth, which is, it is the invitation to step inside the creative process and play there. And I'm really proud that we gave teachers that opportunity. We We did use a gradual release of responsibility model. So the artist kind of took the lead in the first 2 weeks of the residency. In the middle 2 weeks, the artist and teacher kind of co-led. And then in the final 2 weeks, the teacher like flew and the artist stepped back. And I really love this quote from Miss Harding at Greengate Lane Primary Academy in High Green in Sheffield. She said, "I think I have seen a different way to approach the teaching of literacy. I kind of feel I've got a bit more permission to kind of be a bit more out there, a bit more adventurous, a bit more of a risk taker than I perhaps would have been." And considering the fact that our entire project is around creative courage, I'm so glad she could feel that way. By demonstrating creative courage through play and exploration, teachers were placing themselves in a state of vulnerability. And this is significant because learning is a vulnerable action. There is a sense of risk attached to arts-based learning pedagogies, and this can't be avoided. So our teachers, for example, may not have embraced the risk without that gentle push of support from the artist and their encouragement. But by doing so, they were able to empathize with their pupils. You know, all those times a teacher has said, "Come on, we need volunteers for this. Okay, I'll just pick you." Yeah, that's scary for a child. And hopefully we were showing teachers that, you know, empathizing with that fear. And then they also entered kind of this process that, again, Ellsworth says, gives rise to that unmistakable, naked, vulnerable look of simultaneous absorption and self-presence. And I'm very fortunate to have witnessed that a fair few times. Next slide, please. So I want to talk to you now about something that worked incredibly well, and this was immersive spaces and props. We are a massive fan of like object dialogue boxes at Grimm & Co, and we really were looking for interactive, tangible, tactile things that children could engage with. So on the left, you can see my colleague Joe interacting with the forgotten phone. That's from The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, and as you can see, it's like a tiny little wardrobe with an aerial. All of them had aerials that went ridiculously long, I mean, just for the comedy element, really. And then on the right, you can see Miss Harding herself, who's talking on the interdimensional transmitter to Hogarth from the Iron Man. So throughout our teacher and artist reflections, we identified dozens of ways where the teacher said that this really helped them with their confidence. Essentially, what we created here is a form of hot seating. Now, I don't know if anyone here uses hot seating. It's a really common drama technique. I personally struggled with that as a teacher because the children absolutely knew I was not that character because I am Miss Thornton. So it was really hard to kind of get that believability, whereas this was a great opportunity to talk to any character from any story, and then they talk back. The reason why this helped in terms of teachers that were feeling self-confident was because, you know, you had waiting time. You had to wait for the character to get back to you, so you could have some thinking time there to think about what you were going to say. So Hugh Escott from Sheffield Hallam, actually, I was the artist on the Greengate Lane project, which Miss Harding was part of, and that's due to illness among the team during COVID. And Hugh Escott came and observed all the sessions with me and really felt part of a team with him. Wrote really detailed field notes that I used for my evaluation. And he observed the sessions exploring the notion of jeopardy and how pupils responded to a more arts-based approach to literacy lessons. So I'm going to quote a section from his field notes here when referring to Miss H, who's on the right. "She always fiddles with the antennae and stays near the window as if the signal is weak. There is something great to see in how Miss Harding can use what the character thinks or feels to run with an idea or to close off avenues of questioning that are not quite on target in a way that builds engagement rather than positions the child as incorrect." So the communicators provided teachers with a feeling of control whilst providing pupils with a feeling of possibility and freedom. And it's worth just saying here that we gifted these to the trust afterwards. And also I have run multiple teacher CPD sessions since this, where the teachers have made their own interdimensional transmitters, and it's been really successful. So Sheffield Universities and Grimm & Co were keen to see what pupils did and how they reacted to the imagined worlds that they were responsible for creating. This allowed children to experiment with those sociocultural skills I mentioned earlier, but in fictional worlds that they inhabited, in safe spaces, which resulted in like really challenging vocabulary and language being demonstrated by the children. And the teacher was able to see this firsthand, see the impact of working, and the questions that arose from those observations formed the basis of a really, really strong evaluation. Next slide, please. So I also want to talk to you about our immersive theatres. We do take immersive theatres into schools. It's really important that they are completely covered 360 degrees. So the roof is different, the floor is different, and we filled all of those boxes and cupboards with props that related to the text that were being studied. We had 2 of these made and we gifted them to the trust, and both of them are constructed and being used, which is amazing. It's important that the bridge between, it was called the bridge between, by the way, because it was quite literally the bridge between the world of the story and the mortal world, which sadly you and I are inhabiting right now. So it was important that the bridge between arrived midway through the project, because no teacher gets 100% access to something like this all the time, do they? So we wanted to show our toolkit in the classroom and then transfer it into the bridge between. It was used most successfully as a tool to engage and inspire. So the props around the space provided writing prompts and stimuli to ignite children's imaginations. The act of rummaging through cupboards and exploring intricate objects created this sense of adventure and placed the child in the role of the investigator, as Heathcote would say, the role of the expert. And the bridge between, next slide, please. It mirrors Winnicott's good enough holding environment as a potential pivot place between inner and outer realities. What the holding environment holds is the potential for innovation and learning, a potential energy that waits to be released by its intermingling with its user. And we were inspired by this notion of a place of learning where the learner interprets the learning. And this contributed to the creative courage approach we were hoping to observe in teachers. So as the bridge between was filled with props directly linking to the studied text, teachers were able to relinquish a certain level of control, trusting in the pupils to continue the learning narrative through interaction with the space. Next slide, please. So now I want to talk to you about our evaluation methodologies, because this was incredibly successful, and I don't think I could have really done it without the help of the university. So Grimm & Co were keen to develop a game that could be incorporated into teacher and artist reflections. It was important that the game operated at pace and didn't take too much of the teacher's time. And it was also important that after a day of all this creative exploration, we didn't just resort to a survey. Surveys have their place, don't get me wrong, but we really wanted to keep that creativity alive. So we created this game and we took inspiration from both the traditional game of Snap, everybody loves a game of Snap, and the notion of archetypes that are commonly used in tarot. So, I mean, amazingly, one of Grimm & Co.'s volunteers designed these cards. I mean, how beautiful are they? And this was our Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe cards. So I'm just going to talk you through the game. So using the white cards, only the white cards, the teacher and artist embark on a game of Snap. A player snaps when 2 cards of the same suit are played. The winner of the pile of cards does not add the cards to the rest of their hand, but instead leaves the snapped cards in a pile face up in their playing area. The top card, or the snapped card, becomes one of the themes that the player will reflect on. And it's worth saying that every single one of these themes that you can see on the cards linked directly to our inquiry question. Next slide, please. So, for example, in this image here, we've got Beth, who was the teacher at Hartley Brook Primary School in Sheffield. Her 2 snapped piles were pupil progress, sociocultural, and collaboration. So what they would do then is the teacher would place the archetype cards, the black cards, whichever one she wanted, she didn't have to use them all, on these snapped cards, so kind of rating them. So if you move on to the next bit, you can see an example. So Beth kind of, I don't know how to use a word other than rate, but there is a better word, I'm sure. But she gave pupil progress sociocultural courageous and fun, and she also gave collaboration inspired and creative. And once this has happened, the teacher and artist audio record themselves discussing the cards and the chosen archetypes. So the idea is that those archetype cards should have reflected on emotions and feelings that the theme brought out in the teacher and artist. This data was then transcribed and placed in Deduce. We didn't quite have access to NVivo, but we a very similar version, if anyone's from a university on this call, was deduced, and we coded the qualitative data to measure the outcomes. It is important to state here that the University of Sheffield provided match fund and in-kind support at this stage, paying for an annual subscription to deduce, as well as in-house training from my entire staff. And we plan to continue using this program for future projects. I have turned into a code nerd now, thanks to the universities. Like, I can't believe the narratives that came out of that process for me. And if I'm completely honest with you, personally, I'm now very excited about wanting to pursue further academic learning at the university because of this. This evaluation method was a real success because it didn't take too much time. Our pedagogy was embedded throughout. It provided an informal setting to reflect, which resulted in stronger artist and teacher relationships. We got more honest responses as a result, and joint analysis was taking place throughout and during. It's worth saying as well here that we held the teacher in care always throughout this project. Welfare became a massive issue, and it was really important to us that despite all this, you know, the bridge between and the interactive props, it was so important that we listened to our teacher throughout. We compromised, we never pushed them completely out of their comfort zone, because this is a very vulnerable time for teachers in education. Next slide, please. So, I kind of want to talk to you a little bit about how we dealt with ethics around our research. And also, it's worth saying that in February this year, we went back to Greengate Lane and shared our findings with the children, which was one of the most like heartwarming experiences that I've had. So we revisited one of the schools, Greengate Lane Academy in Sheffield, in February to share our findings. The children are in year 5 now, and they participated in chapter and verse last summer. Like the summer term. Hugh collected ethical permission from pupils, parents and carers, and I've just put a little snapshot of the ethical form that we gave to pupils to make it a little bit more accessible. And he observed sessions taking place and took field notes. It's really important as well saying here that obviously if a child gave ethical permission but their parent carer did not, we obviously did not use them in the study. So I was the active facilitator, as I previously said, and the pupils gave themselves pseudonyms instead of using their real names in the study, and we copied those down as written, including any spelling mistakes, because we're child-led. So Hugh is really interested in this idea of jeopardy and how pupils respond to a more arts-based approach to literacy lessons. Next slide, please. So we focused on a child in the class who wanted to be known as Professor Chicken, but she spelt it Professor Chicken, and I like that even more. We presented her journey to the children as a published story. So instead of giving loads of, you know, qualitative data, we combined that to create a really fun story. And again, we got one of our volunteer illustrators to illustrate them. So we think Professor Chicken looks either like the chicken on the left or the chicken on the right. You can decide in your imagination. I read the story aloud to the whole class as a storytelling session, and being present as the pupils heard the story of their learning journey was such a thoroughly enjoyable experience. Me and Hugh had such a lovely time. The children were demonstrating self-reflection throughout the retelling of the story, and it was so heartwarming to hear their agreements and responses to certain story sections. Next slide, please. So on this slide is an extract from the story, and I've included the comments from Professor Chicken in bold and underlined. She vocalized these out loud as she heard her experience read aloud. So I'm going to just read this extract. So we called the story A Story About a Story, and this chapter is called Professor Chicken Creates a Drama. Professor Chicken found this hard. I did. This bit was really hard. She didn't have an idea of a place to describe, and without that, she couldn't write the drama. Lots of other pupils did, and they were getting on with their work, which made Professor Chicken feel worse. That was horrible. Oh, it's such a horrible feeling when everyone else knows what they're doing. The investigator came to help Professor Chicken, and they talked about her rubbish man character. Some other pupils kept on suggesting things for her place, like the rubbish dump. They were trying to help, but Professor Chicken was finding this frustrating. That was so horrible. Mister, you were being so annoying. And then the two pupils then laughed. Hearing Professor Chicken reflect on our reflections of her experience and agree with them was an interesting interaction to be a part of. And when young people self-reflect on something they found difficult, they can often find something really positive, or at least in the example above, reflect with distance in a more objective way. And developing pupils' ability to self-reflect is a key socio-cultural skill that will enable, like critical thinking and mindfulness and assertiveness. And just think of how many adults really struggle to, admit when they found something really difficult. So again, it felt like this project came to a natural, beautiful cyclical close by going back to the school and sharing our research. And that's something that I will definitely start doing more in future projects, making sure that the children feel like researchers, because they are. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening, because I gave you a lot of information there.
Thanks so much, Gemma. Another really fantastic and inspiring story about your work in schools. And it sounds as though from the way you described, you were seeing a lot of the impacts there and then in front of you. And interesting to hear about how Hugh might be taking that evaluation a bit further. And I see he couldn't join us today, but is that an ongoing piece of work looking at that, the impact around the work?
Yeah, it is. I'm actually meeting with him tomorrow to discuss it further. We've just actually been accepted onto the UK LA conference this year, the international conference in Exeter. So we'll be presenting our work there then. But also, I think what I'm wanting to develop more now is to create game-based evaluations with children. It's worked so well with adults, and I did the right thing by trying it out with adults first. I think that was right. But the problems we're facing with evaluation with children, don't know if any other academics on the call are feeling this, but often children respond in a way they think you want them to respond. Did that make sense? So sometimes we're questioning the validity of what they're saying rather than them just being honest. So I think trying to get that it was the informality about the game that really got the most fruitful responses. So we are definitely wanting to develop that further. It's also worth just saying really quickly that Nick's going to post a link to a YouTube film. So if anyone wants to see like the cutest film ever that's only 10 minutes long of our project, he's going to just pop that down in the chat.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Gemma. I've just got another question really to follow up with you on something that you mentioned kind of early on in the presentation. I was interested in the approach you said where you've got the sort of teacher feedback on the wall and then you played that back to the senior leaders in the school. I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how well that was received and what they perhaps decided to do with that information.
Yeah, that's a great question. Mixed. So when we first presented the wall to the teachers, to the senior leaders, it was split in half. So I'm going to be totally honest with you, like half of the senior leaders were really shocked and upset by what they read, and I think that's an important response. The other half were very much like, well, we don't, trying to justify a lot of the time and slightly on the defensive. But we all signed a contract. We all made together, teachers, senior leaders, artists, all made a service level agreement that we all signed. And some senior leaders absolutely supported and gave. I think it was more important that they gave the teachers that space. So maybe in the 6-week residency, it didn't matter if every learning objective and all the writing wasn't in their formal books, because we actually use journals with our children and young people all the time, and that's highly successful. What's a great thing as well, I go off piste a lot, by the way, I will come back around, I promise, but what's a great thing as well is Ashtray Academy Trust has actually adopted journals, and all their children have journals now, which I think is amazing. But then it goes on the flip side, and like in week 2 at one of the schools, there were the senior leaders did a mock stead. So obviously our teachers, in a really nice way, did not care about our project because they were so stressed out about this mock stead. So it really was swings and roundabouts in terms of that. We are about to embark on another long-term project in the new academic year, again working with the universities, and it's worth saying that my main aim is to get senior leadership more on board. I feel like I got strategic leadership in the trust on board teachers on board, but it was that middle, those head teachers that I just needed to get on board. And it's worth saying as well that, like, I have super amounts of empathy for senior leaders. They've got so much that they need to deal with, and especially if, I mean, we had to delay because of COVID. So in 1 year, writing may have been like a strategic focus, but when we actually finally got into the school, it might not have been, and it might have been something else. So it's really hard for them to navigate. But I think those teachers that and senior leaders that really did commit and really did buy in got the most out of it.
Well, welcome back, Stevie, by the way. I've just got a couple of questions to put to both of you in the sort of little time we've got left. And one, I suppose, links to what you've just talked about, Gemma, in terms of the last couple of years and COVID recovery. So it'd be interesting to hear both of your reflections on whether you think the arts and culture in schools, from your experience, has perhaps been deprioritized in post-COVID catch-up, where perhaps there's been a need to focus on other core skills that may have dropped over the course of home learning and the pandemic effect. And do you think that is on, if that was the case, do you think it is now on the up again, where arts and culture is back on the as more of a priority in schools, if indeed it did dip? So I'd just be interested in either of your reflections. So Stevie, shall I come to you first on that?
Yeah, that was really interesting, Gemma, by the way, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I've been in this role for just over a year, and I actually taught FE and HE before gaining this role. So I taught through COVID and sort of felt from a teacher's perspective the impact. And it's interesting what you said about senior leadership, Gemma, and sort of the, dare I say the word, Ofsted. Every individual school has got its own agenda, its own quality improvement plan. And I think it's really difficult for senior leaders and teachers to sort of negotiate in-house of what their priorities are. I don't think we need to tell schools how worthwhile arts and culture is. I think it's the broader curriculums issue that we aren't able to integrate and embedding it as much, and sort of blend those learning opportunities. And we look at all the conversations in Parliament during COVID about, sort of academic expectations of our young people. I mean, we put an awful amount of pressure on young people to achieve particular things. And what I noticed teaching FE is, I don't know what quite happens to them, but we destroy this love of knowledge and sort of learning, and it becomes a chore. And it's very prescribed what we're teaching, whereas using arts and look at the activities for teachers as well in Gemma's project and for ours, about getting them into somewhere, getting them on the feet, getting that embodiment of what arts and culture, and it relates to so many different things as well. So I understand with my teacher head on the pressures massively of the benchmarks that we've set. And there is so much good that arts and culture can do with regards to the impact on health and well-being, and again, not just of our young people, of our teachers. It's so important. There's so many teachers leaving the profession, and it's quite concerning, really, that we're gonna lose all these good people. So I think it's a broader conversation, socially and politically, of how we can integrate a little bit more. But I think there's definitely been a drop since COVID, or there was initially, of participation. Schools didn't want to let people in. They didn't want to come out because of the safety risks, the assessment. Now there's the cost increase of being able to participate, in school and out of school. So I think there's so many barriers, and I don't think it's because schools don't want to do it. I think one of our jobs is to facilitate how they can do it.
Thanks, Stevie. And Gemma?
Yeah, I mean, the Durham Commission for Creativity in Education was a great publication to emphasize how much we need creativity in our national curriculum. And I do think that arts organisations are definitely working towards that and using that to inform. Also, like, we're heavily funded by Arts Council England and the priorities from them, and the LSEPs, which obviously Stevie's representing now, and I'm on the steering group for Imagine Rotherham as well. We're trying our best to bridge that gap. But when you've got such a fit to burst in national curriculum, it's just hard to find the time, isn't it? And I don't ever blame any teachers for not prioritizing this when they've got so much that they need to do. And so I think that's why the Teacher Development Fund from Paul Hamlin Foundation, which they are just an amazing funder to work with, is so vital, because it allows us to prove to teachers that it works, and that you don't have to make space for creativity. It can be embedded into your already existing practice. I guess for partnerships with universities, they can significantly help by documenting the work that's being done by working in partnership with schools and arts organisations, publicising in publications the work that's being done. I mean, Grimm and we're not shy when we say that we want to influence policy. That's what we want to do. So speaking at something like this today is great for us to share the work that we're wanting to do, and to meet other like-minded people like Stevie, who I'd never met before this. So I think that's all I've got to add.
Thanks, Gemma. And that does lead nicely into the last question, really, which is around those relationships that you have with universities in particular. And Gemma, you talked a little bit about the evaluation piece. Stevie, I think in your introduction, you talked about the wider partnership and covering FE and HE. So I suppose one last question would be, are there things from your experience that you think higher education institutions, universities could bring to partnerships that would be beneficial to amplify the impact that you have? And Gemma, you just talked a little bit about evaluation, so I wonder if there's anything else you wanted to add.
Yeah, firstly, definitely that about evaluation. Like, I have developed so much in my own professional development by being introduced to these forms of, like, especially as a child-led organization, we get a hell of a lot of qualitative data, and a lot of funders want to see quantitative data, and that the coding really helped with that and helped to see like a bigger picture. I would say helping us to obtain some skills would be great. And then the only other thing I would add to that, which I think was mentioned when we all met before Christmas at the old post office in town, was I think it's super important that researchers build relationships with the organizations that they're working with, and the schools as well, because in a really, I mean this in the nicest way, like we know the children and young people and the organizations in our area and local community, and we also have expertise that we can share. So I think a dual sharing and learning approach is a great one.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Gemma. And Stevie, any thoughts from you on HE?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely echo what Gemma said with regards to, I think the support of HE raises our profile on the work that we're trying to do. It justifies it a little bit more, rather than, again, going back to my old jazz hands and glitter quote. I think, sort of having that academic element just strengthens what we're trying to do politically on a wider conversation and an opportunity to create that dialogue. And I think with regards to Doncaster, we have got some HE provision within creative industries within the city, and a really large college as well. And I think we do have a connection with them, and that we would like to build up, and we want to support those young people in careers. So all this work we're doing for emerging artists is hopefully going to contribute to them as well. So I think, again, it's about that working in partnership and developing that relationship. And we've still got, we are taking sort of, I'm not very patient, and these things are taking a lot longer than I would like to. But yeah, it is on our plans of building that conversation with regards to creative careers and how we can how HE can use and FE can use our arts organisations to improve their practice, but also how we can use them to sort of elevate our standing. And like Gemma says, it's about, you know, we know our communities. You know, I don't know about you, Gemma, but I'm from this community, and I feel like it's our responsibility to be able to build all these things together and to link all these things together. And like you said, influence policy. We need to be able to influence on a local and regional basis, because we've got that passion ultimately, but we've also got that knowledge. So I think any support from HE establishments like, you know, such as Civic University, Sheffield Hallam, is going to really drive that and help the momentum for that, and to raise our voice and raise our platform.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you. Well, I think that comes to the end of our questions. So it just leaves me to say thank you so much for your time, Gemma and Stevie. It's been really fantastic to hear about your work, and may you long continue to have fantastic impacts in Doncaster and Rotherham. And thank you to everyone who could attend today. We will be recording, as we said at the top, recording the session and making that available. And we're just sharing some information there on some further webinars in the series, including Darts, who will be part of our next case study. So we've got them over the next few months, and really we're very keen to explore the different relationships that universities can have with all the different groups across the sector of different shapes and sizes that is encompassed within arts and culture. So thank you so much again, Steve and Gemma, for your time. Really appreciate it. And there's some links in the chat, I think, for the newsletter and for the Civic University Network. So we will come to a close there, and thank you once more. Have a great rest of the afternoon.
Thanks, Debbie.
Thanks so much. Bye.